and its belief is their biggest threat and challenge going forward through this difficult period in history.
Thank you, Khaleesi. Thank you, Shukri. I hope everybody hears me okay. I'm very pleased to join your conversation. I wasn't following it from the outset, but I can imagine the issues that you were discussing. Answering your question, Shukri, I think you should really try to see the world from Russian optics, from the optics of Russian citizens. I myself was born in the beginning of the 70s, and I remember quite well the perestroika times and all the high hopes that we had for a better world, for a more fair and just world where everybody would be equal, sorry, and everybody will have equal opportunities for development. So we made big concessions. Our leadership, might criticize it for that. One might really applaud to what was done, but in reality, we heard a lot of promises from the West. It's not a secret now, and a lot of Western politicians now admit that there were promises given to the Soviet leadership at that time, which accelerated the mirror measures that were taken by Gorbachev and by the others, namely dismantling of Eastern Bloc, dismantling of Communist Party system. In fact, Russia has changed drastically. If you look at Russia today, you will not see a lot of differences in terms of political system, in terms of economy. Nobody is against private property. If you look at Russian media space, regardless what you might see in the publications of Western media, I would say that Russian media space is much more free and much more diverse than here in the States, for example, to the extent that I can compare it. So, coming back to the perspective of common Russians, we would see that we have really covered our part of the road for a more fair and just world. We were making this choice deliberately. It was not made because somebody was winning over us, and then all of a sudden we found ourselves labeled as losers in the Cold War. So we absolutely do not share this way of presenting things. We think that it was our common victory at that moment, but we were deprived of this victory. And from the outset, our leadership, even at Yeltsin time, started to point out to this injustice, saying that one should abide by the principle of indivisibility of security, where security of one country shouldn't be guaranteed at the expense of security of the other country. There were a lot of documents signed which had very good intentions and good faith, but they were unfortunately not implemented in the framework of OSCE, for example, or Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe, or in the framework of Russia-NATO relations. There were good words, but what we had in reality, we had absolutely uncontrolled and unhindered extension of NATO to the east, which is absolutely contrary to any promises and to any logic that was prevailing at the beginning of the 90s. And of course, it causes in my country, among my compatriots, the feeling that somebody is fooling around with us, somebody is really having very bad ideas towards our country, and we have a lot of confirmation of these plans through the leaks and through the interviews of some of very famous politicians and personalities of today and yesterday. So we really have a lot of things to reproach to the West. And first of all, of course, the West was hypocritical towards Russia. And now it's absolutely clear to us that the real objective of the West all these years was to destroy Russia, to weaken Russia at least, to preserve and to safeguard the Western dominant position, the so-called Pax Americana, where the U.S. dominates the world and sets the rules which the others have to obey. we were absolutely against this from the very beginning. I remember the time when there was this Yugoslavia crisis, when the West breached the elementary norms of international law in terms of Kosovo. We were saying that the world is changing, that this is a terrible mistake. The West, of course, doesn't want to recall these times right now. Actually, the whole history for Western countries and for the US especially starts on 24th of February last year. So they speak about this unprovoked, allegedly, aggression of Russia against Ukraine, trying to wipe out the whole history that was prior to this moment when we decided that there was no other way to save the people of Donbass from Ukrainian army. So that's the common tactics of the West. They try to highlight one things and they don't want to view other things. And Halisi, you were commenting on the discussion before Shukri posed to me this question. I hope I covered more or less this issue. You were saying what is the you were asking what is the main uh, the main ideas that we want to bring to the world our perspective. You said that the world, the Western media in particular, lacks Russian view, Russian position. But you know that every time that we have to, every time we say something, every time we present the truth, the facts, which is very difficult to argue with, we're being accused of spreading propaganda. So now they label Russian propaganda everything that is contrary to the official position of Western countries. And the problem right now is that the Western mainstream media and the Western establishment, they absolutely don't care about the facts, about the truth. So we present the facts. We ask to give us very logical explanation of these facts. We are absolutely ready to argue, to discuss all these things, but they just don't listen. They just pretend that these facts do not exist, and it is very true about a lot of things that you would hear about this current stage of Ukrainian crisis, or as we call it, a special military operation of Russia in Ukraine. You would hear a lot of things about bad behavior of Russia, but you will not hear the facts that we raise and that absolutely show to the contrary of what the West claims. We can start from any situations. This Bucha hoax that was, for example, that happened 1 year ago, and I remember quite well we were asking the British presidency of the Security Council at that time to organize a special meeting on Bucha because we wanted to prove to the world that this is a hoax, that this is a staged provocation, and still there are a lot of claims, a lot of facts that they just don't want to take into consideration. They just pretend that this is not true and that has never happened. But British presidency, in clear breach of the rules and of procedure of Security Council, just denied this meeting to us. They said that they think that this issue is not urgent and it can be discussed in a more broad context on another meeting. And there were several breaches, very clear breaches of the rules of procedure of the British presidency at this time, which indicates absolutely clearly that the West is behind this provocation, that especially UK was absolutely aware of what was going on in Bucha. And what do you know now about Bucha? I think that they try to impose the narrative that this is a Russian crime and Russia should be punished about it. But of course, they try to put in the shade all these inconsistencies, to put it mildly, that absolutely do not make this story trustworthy. They still haven't provided the names of the people whom they allegedly found there in Bucha, because they claim that they were killed by Russians, but actually we have a big suspicion that these people were killed by Ukrainians when they entered Bucha, and there are a lot of indications of this. And of course, if we had the names, it would have been clear easily for us to find out the truth. But they are not interested in the truth. They're interested of presenting this as an anti-Russian show because they are bringing everybody there to Bucha. After Bucha, there were several other similar situations. They always happened when Russian troops retreated for different reasons. But there were absolutely clear signs of these staged provocations. It's enough to remember the situation when we retreated from some areas near Kharkov, and there were even the videos in the net showing how Ukrainians were making this provocation, how they were killing people, how they were placing these people in the way they would have been found, and it would have been easier to accuse Russian troops of this. There are plenty of these videos in the web. There are a lot of people who witnessed this, but the West just tries to ignore. They just don't want to pay any attention to the truth because they are not interested in truth. They are interested only in showing that Russia is a pariah state, that Russians are criminals. They want to cancel Russia, cancel Russian culture. We have absolutely no illusions right now about the clear intentions of the West. Again, we unfortunately have seen that all our suspicions that I mentioned, suspicions from the 90s, they just came true. So it was kind of a game. The West never wanted any cooperation with Russia. The West never wanted to be friends with Russia, never wanted peaceful cooperation and even coexistence with Russia. And actually, of course, I don't think that a lot of people have illusions right now that it's not about Ukraine, that we have now a war with NATO. It's a proxy war, and NATO is waging this war in Ukraine until the last Ukrainian. And Ukraine's interests are absolutely not taken into consideration by the West in this war. The only idea is to weaken Russia and to prevent the crumbling of U.S. Dominance in the world. I think this is also quite clear. So with what we are fighting right now for is really our national interests, the survival of our nation. And of course, this is a big challenge to the West. We understand that the West will try to do whatever it can to prevent the Pax Americana from being undermined. But I think that the situation is such that we have to go forward and we have to pursue the goals of our special military operation. We have repeatedly said that we would be ready to see negotiations and to see some kind of a deal, which would, of course, lead to the implementation of the goals, to the achievement of the goals of our special military operation by peaceful means. And it's not a difficult task. I don't think it's something extraordinary that we demand from Ukraine. We just want to have a very peaceful peace-loving neighbor at our borders. First of all, this neighbor should not threaten the Russian-speaking population of its own country. As you know, there were 8 years of war before the start of our special military operation, and indeed, the special military operation was intended to stop this war. There was no other way to stop it, unfortunately. We tried Minsk agreements, but now we know that they were only a smoke screen for Western strategy to weaken Russia. So this is goal number one. Of course, demilitarization of Ukraine, because Ukraine has been militarized by NATO, by Western countries, and now they openly are saying this, that they have been bringing weapon and training, making training for Ukrainian soldiers since 2014. Another thing is, of course, we don't want to see Nazi criminals and neo-Nazi glorified in our neighbor. We want to see the equal rights for all the nationalities, all the ethnicities in Ukraine, which is, by the way, guaranteed by Ukrainian constitution. This is very important, and I don't think this is something extraordinary that we demand. Look at Belgium, for example. Look at Switzerland. I don't think that it will be tolerable for a lot of people in the world if, for example, Belgium decides to abandon French or Flemish language, or Switzerland will just say that everybody needs to speak German. There are absolutely no reasons for this. It's the culture of diversity. So diversity is being promoted by the West everywhere, but when it comes to Russia, they say no, you don't have any rights to ask for respect of your diversity. So this is in a nutshell what I wanted to say. I don't know, maybe there are some specific things that you want me to cover. I would rather stop at this point.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. And you're right. So last night we had a space, and Patrick, who is my co-host, he hosted it. And we had some very, very acclaimed and respected activists and journalists on there. And the title of the space was War Propaganda. And we discussed extensively the propaganda that the West has always done. My country, I'm British, and the West and NATO countries, in a scenario of war, right from Iraq until what's happening in the present day. So when you talk about the fact that it doesn't matter how much, from a Russian perspective, you try to clarify, it's just labeled as propaganda. That's deliberate. That's hypocritical of our governments to do that. So we totally understand that. But thank you so much, Ambassador. What I'd like to do, Ambassador, is I'd like to go to my co-host, Patrick. Patrick Henningsen, who has a couple of questions. I also have a question. Then we'll come to the panelists, and we'll come to you, Harrison, if that's okay. Thank you, Ambassador. Go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, thank you, Ambassador, for making the time today. We really, really appreciate it. I was going to ask previously about, is there a practical path to some sort of negotiated settlement to the current conflict? Like, in other words, what are the practical steps that, as a diplomat from the Russian Federation perspective, what would you like to see happen, or what can happen? And also, how do you feel about the efforts that the Chinese delegation has made in recent weeks? How does that factor into the current situation?
Thank you, Patrick. I will start from the last part of your question. We are very much appreciative of what our Chinese partners are doing, because they are doing this really in good faith. They are trying to find a solution to the crisis which is shattering the world. It's quite clear, and there is no visible end to this crisis because of the policy of the Western countries. The problem is that the equation that the West is trying to impose on us with the help of Zelensky and the others, it equals to the defeat of Russia, to the acknowledgement of Russia's failure. So this kind of Zelensky formula that is being promoted by Ukraine, it's absolutely not viable, because it equals to the defeat of Russia, and we see absolutely no reasons to accept anything like this, even from the point of view of military situation of the ground. So we are not interested in escalation of this conflict, but it's quite clear that the escalation of this conflict, it comes not from Russia, but it comes from Western countries who are supplying arms and other kinds of assistance to Ukraine. Today I listened to some remarks by EU Foreign Minister Mr. Borrell at some panel discussion, and he acknowledged quite clearly and bluntly. He's a blunt man, Mr. Borrell, living in the majestic garden, and there are, as you know, jungle around this garden where we are all living, the third world and Russia and the others. So he said openly that if we don't support Ukraine, if we stop to support Ukraine, it will not endure for a couple of days, and that's clear. So Ukraine is absolutely being a kind of private military company of the West, receiving arms, receiving all kinds of support. And when people are saying that Ukraine is fighting Russia, I think this is laughable, because it's not Ukraine which is fighting Russia. Yes, Ukrainians are fighting Russia, but they enjoy absolutely unlimited support from the West, and of course they get military intelligence, which is very important. They get technology, they get advisors, training, and so whatsoever. So I don't think I need to explain it. It's quite obvious that the West is both feet there in this conflict, which is so far proxy, but it's only one step from a hot stage. As for what practical things should be done, again, you need to explain that the decision to start the special military operation on the 24th of February last year was a very difficult decision, and it was really the last resort of what our leadership decided to do, because all other means, all other negotiative possibilities have been already exhausted at this moment. You should recall that that before the 24th of February, I think 1 week prior to this, there was a very important intensification of Ukrainian shelling of Donbas, and it was quite clear that Ukraine is about to launch the offensive, and there were hundreds of thousands of refugees to Russia at this moment. So people just want to forget about this in the West. Some people say that this is Russian propaganda, but there are facts about this. There are people who came to Russia during these days, and there are accounts of these people. They are saying this openly, just the West doesn't want to see it. So we started this special military operation with concrete goals, and the most important goal, I maybe simplify, but again, I would repeat that we want to see a very friendly, peace-loving neighbor at our borders who is not threatening Russia, who is not discriminating Russian-speaking population, who is not glorifying Nazi criminals, who is not promoting nationalism. I don't think that we are asking too much. So we are asking all these things to be implemented. And of course, we don't want Ukraine to be part of NATO, because NATO is an aggressive bloc. NATO has proven several times that Russia is a military objective for NATO, and it doesn't want peaceful cooperation. It's a treacherous bloc. So we want all these conditions to be implemented, and if someone would say that yes, they can be met, these conditions, without military means, then I think we would be ready for negotiations and negotiable solution. We have repeatedly confirmed this. But the Western position and the Ukrainian position, of course, Ukrainians are not playing any role in this, but still they are mouthpieces of this Western logic. They are saying that the only basis for this solution is so-called Zelensky formula, and I described Zelensky formula to you. It's absolutely something that we can't accept. And it means that, of course, given the absence of this peaceful solution, we have to count only on our military means and on our army. I would say that there is a big support, very big support in the society for this military operation. It's bigger than 70%, according to different estimates, and the support of President Putin is also very high. So it's absolutely the contrary of what the West was expecting to see in Russia. And this is kind of a stalemate at this moment, but we think that the militarily situation is also going into our favor, regardless of the fact that the Ukrainians are claiming the opposite. But again, we would prefer, of course, peaceful solution. We would prefer peaceful negotiations, and we are absolutely ready to discuss realistic terms of peace with Ukraine and with the West, because the idea now is not only about Russia and Ukraine making peace. The idea is of how we would coexist with the West, which has already shown its true colors towards Russia, and it has already revealed its aggressive, absolutely Russophobic nature. This is the big issue, because this is also part of the settlement that should be taken into consideration if we want to have sustainable and long-term peace in Europe and in the world.
And just briefly, one quick question, and I want to go to journalist Freddie Ponton, who has a question about the Nord Stream pipeline issue. Ambassador, the recent indictment of Vladimir Putin in the International Criminal Court, the arrest warrant, and also more broadly sanctions, what sort of difficulties do these pose for people like yourself who are trying to conduct diplomacy? And what do you think the real intention of the ICC arrest warrant is for President Vladimir Putin?
I don't see, frankly, any consequences of ICC arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin or for Maria Lvova-Belova. First of all, because the claims behind it are absolutely laughable, and the way it was done, it absolutely shows that it has nothing to do with any accountability. It's just part of some propaganda campaign against Russia. We indicated several times what is the real situation with the Ukrainian children that come to Russia. We held special events in the UN Security Council, and there you can find links to this event, this ARIA formula meeting, in my account. But again, the West doesn't want to listen to the facts. They just want to accuse us. We are not. We haven't ratified the Rome Statute. That's why these decisions and these measures are absolutely null and void for Russia. We do not acknowledge them, and a lot of countries also do not acknowledge the competence of ICC, including the United States, by the way. I'm not speaking about double standards. I think they are too obvious in this regard, and it's not up to me to point out. I just and what was the second part um, of your question? Sorry, I
Ambassador,
lost my train of
it
thought.
was about sanctions.
Sanctions. Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. Sanctions. Well, I think that there is a very brave a very brave journalist from WBA radio, Randy Krediker. I think many of you know him. So he visited Russia recently. He spent some time in Moscow and he spent some time in Donbass as well. He wanted to see with his own eyes, what's the situation in Russia, what is the impact of the sanctions. And I would recommend all of you who are interested to learn the truth about this just to see his publications. I think he's absolutely unbiased person. He had no idea of what's happening in Russia. He had a lot of suspicions about what's happening. He had a lot of suspicions that we are not telling the truth, and in fact, the Russian economy is crumbling. But what he saw in Moscow, what he saw in Russia, was absolutely above his expectations. He was absolutely delighted to see Moscow. He was absolutely astonished by the way Russian economy is performing. So all these sanctions, I think these sanctions are harming first and foremost Western countries themselves and the United States, and you see this by the economic situation. So it's not only about the figures; it's the fact that we now have the golden opportunities to find other partners, and they are already coming to our market. We already found the way to ensure our prosperity and stability with other means, with the means of other countries that are credible partners and that do not have any I would say double standards in dealing with my country, and we have succeeded. So you do not feel any effect of the sanctions in Russia. There are some things that have become more difficult for Russian citizens, like for example traveling or flying to some countries, to European countries first and foremost. But it's absolutely not the reason for any kind of frustration towards our leadership, because we absolutely understand that these measures are absolutely retaliatory measures from Western countries who can't show otherwise the way they are mad at us because we challenged the world order that they want to preserve and they want to preserve in their favor. So there is absolutely consensus in Russia on the way the Russian economy is working. Yes, we love Europe. We love to travel to Europe. We love to buy European goods. But this is not the end of the world. If we buy instead of European goods, goods from China, or what is more important, if we produce these goods ourselves, if we replace Western technology by Russian technology, if we replace Western investments by investments from other friendly nations. So it's not a big deal, and it's already happening. The only side that is losing in this regard is the West, and I think this is quite clear through the economic situation, especially in Europe. I frankly do not understand the reasoning of Europe. I can understand more or less the malicious nature of United States and the ideas that United States have behind all this, but I don't see any strategy in Europe. Europe has lost really almost everything. It has lost its geopolitical clout. It has lost its economic perspectives because its economic perspectives were based on Russian cheap energy resources. Now they have expensive American and other natural resources, and they will have to build upon these resources. And this is absolutely another setting, another conditions, another rules of the game. I'm not a specialist in economy, but even for me, it's quite clear that there are no such openings for European economy that were there when Russia was cooperating with Europe, and it was not our choice. We would be ready to continue this cooperation. So, in fact, the whole world also is suffering from this crisis. But if you analyze why the world is suffering, you would see that it is suffering mostly because of the economic measures that the West has introduced against Russia. So when they are saying that Russia contributed to the worsening of economic situation in the world, no, this is not true. It's really the direct consequences of Western measures. It's the only source of tensions in the world, economic tensions, I mean. So if they drop all these measures, I think the world will breathe happily. But of course, they will not do it because this is political. It has nothing to do with common sense and with normal human logic. It's just malice, and it's just being mad at our country because our country has challenged this very unfair world order, which has been consolidated for the last 30 years.
Thank you, Ambassador. And we are mindful of the time. We have some time for a few brief questions. I want to invite French journalist Freddie Ponton to the stage. And I believe Freddie has a question for the Ambassador regarding the Nord Stream 2 case. Go ahead, Freddie.
Thank you, Patrick. Your Excellency, it's a privilege to be able to ask you my questions in person. I'll take this opportunity as well to thank the host, Shukri and Khaleesi and Patrick Henningsen for making this happen. So here's my question to you, Ambassador. How do you feel about the US and the UK vetoing the possibility of a United Nations Security Council resolution to investigate the attacks on the Nord Stream pipeline?
Well, thank you very much. I think that it's quite clear. It doesn't require very lengthy explanation because again, the West is not caring about the truth. Now there are a lot of indications, a lot of reasons to believe that the U.S. And its allies were behind this sabotage of Nord Stream. We were promoting initiative in the UN, which only implied that the Secretary General analyzes the situation and presents his ideas of how international investigation could look like. Because we don't think that we should come to a world where it would be absolutely possible for everybody to blow up energy and other infrastructure, critical infrastructure of the others, which is situated outside of the country. It would be a very dangerous world. We don't want to see this world materialize. But there was this act of sabotage. We became the victim of this sabotage, and we just demanded the truth. We demanded to prove the facts, to prove the claims that were made by Simon Hirsch, by the others, to kind of act in accordance with common sense and not with Russophobic calculations. And what did we hear back? We hear and we continue to hear a lot of absolutely ridiculous speculations and accusations that Russia itself has blown up its own pipeline, inflicting a big economic loss to itself. So we're just, in fact, shot in our own feet. This is laughable, and there are no serious attempts in the world, in the Western countries, to do anything to investigate this kind of absolutely atrocious and heinous crime. So, of course, when the Western countries are blocking this move in the Security Council, they are just exposing themselves. They are absolutely confirming our worst suspicions that they are behind this kind of sabotage and that they are not interested in any kind of clarity, in any kind of truth vis-a-vis this crime. So I think it's clear not only for us, but for everybody who just tries to be objective and who is not brainwashed by Western propaganda and who has ability and possibility to think openly.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. It's very clear, obviously. And perhaps just a quick last question, if I may. What is your personal take on the February press conference in Washington, D.C., where we have Joe Biden and Olaf Scholz, the German Chancellor, talking about pulling the plug on Nord Stream 2? And do you see any correlations with what we've observed on the 26th of September 22? Do you think there is a correlation between that, and were you ever suspicious of it?
I think everybody should be suspicious given the facts and given the situation of how it is developing. It's absolutely stunning to see Germany, which is also affected by this crime, almost in the same way as we are affected. To see Germany absolutely passive and absolutely following the orders of Washington and displaying absolutely no interest to investigate it. But again, it's not up to me to comment. I think it's up to German people to decide. I just can't say that I am very much saddened by the fact what has Germany turned to. I love this country. I love German people. I spend a lot of time there, and I never imagined that Germany can be so impotent and so absolutely not having any views of its own. This is deplorable, and again, it's not up to me to comment, and not up to me to decide.
Thank you very much indeed, Ambassador. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Freddie, and thank you so much, Ambassador. Ambassador, I would just like to ask how we're doing for time. Are you able to stay with us for a little while longer, please? I just want to check in with you.
I'm afraid I have 10 more minutes, and then I need to go.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I see there's quite a few hands up. I'd also like to welcome Jackson Hinkle to the panel. Thank you for joining us. I know White House correspondent Simon Ateba has joined us. Simon, did you have any quick question for the ambassador before I go to the rest of the panel, please?
Yes, thank you. This is Simon Ateba with Today News Africa in Washington, D.C. Ambassador, I don't know if you've answered this. How do you think this war between Ukraine and Russia can come to an end?
I think I covered it already. I explained that we would be ready for negotiations, provided that these negotiations would lead to the implementation of the goals of our special military operation, in the peaceful implementation of these goals. And I also enumerated these goals, which are absolutely clear and which are not exceptional. It's just a normal desire of a normal country to see a peaceful neighbor at its border, and not a hornet's nest, neo-Nazi hornet's nest that is threatening its security and that is suppressing and abusing its own Russian-speaking citizens.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Thank you, Simon, for joining us. I know there are panelists who are also requesting the mic, so some of them are going to stay with us, and then I will rotate the mics. Thank you, George, for joining us. Really appreciate it. I know you write a lot about NATO and the war generally. Do you have any questions very quickly for the ambassador, please? And then I will go to the permanent panelists who've got their hands raised. Go ahead, George.
Yes, I am. Good morning, Mr. Ambassador. Many of us who are well disposed towards Russia are increasingly troubled by the various red lines that Russia has laid down, and the red lines that the NATO powers, including Ukraine, have crossed, whether it's sending in weapons, tanks into Ukraine, or the Nord Stream pipelines, and now the drone attack on the Kremlin, and are now worried as to how Russia will respond and whether Russia will respond, because the more red lines that are crossed, the more red lines that will be crossed, and then the situation does indeed become very dangerous. Thank you.
Thank you, George. I think that all the possible red lines have already been crossed since the moment when the NATO has become implicated in this conflict, in this proxy war against Russia. It was a premeditated strategy of NATO. Now it's absolutely clear that NATO was preparing for this situation for many years, and they do not conceal this truth. As for the red lines, as for our response, I'm a diplomat. I'm not a militarist strategist, and I'm not responsible for this part of our policy, which implies certain responses. But I'm absolutely sure that the response will be there, and that the response that will be there will be absolutely adequate to all the challenges that we have and to all these red lines that have already been crossed by the West.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Thank you, George, for your question. I'm just trying to move this along really quickly because I'd like to just very quickly cover the panelists who have been here. They did take part in last night's war propaganda space, and they have been waiting to speak to you. So thank you for staying with us for that extra time, Ambassador. So let me just go to Harrison very quickly. Harrison, if you could ask your question, then we'll come to yourself, Jose, and then we'll go to Berna and then Jackson. Go ahead, Harrison.
Hey, Dmitry, my question for you is, why is Russia holding back in Ukraine? We know their military is more powerful than what they have shown in Ukraine, a lot stronger. They're an adversary to the world powers. But in Ukraine, it seems like they're holding back. Why is that?
Thank you, Harrison. I think that the answer is quite clear. For Russia, it's not a military operation, it's the military operation. And it's the military operation where we face very close people to us, because with Ukrainians, we used to be one country, one people for quite a long time. We can't take it off from our mind that these are the same people that we are, only they are brainwashed, only they are manipulated, and only they are used by the West in the geopolitical game towards Russia. So we can't afford such methods of war as, for example, the United States did in Iraq or UK, when the whole cities were erased from the surface of the ground. No, we don't do such things. We try to save manpower, we try to save civilian lives, and if you analyze the reports, you would see that the Russian army is targeting military and military infrastructure, energy infrastructure, which is also linked to military targets. You would see that the reports on the casualties, all these Ukrainian reports about missiles hitting buildings, residential buildings. When you look at the details, you will see that this is in 99.9% result of the work of Ukrainian anti-air missiles, because it's laughable to claim that Russia is using these S-300 missiles, which are used for anti-aircraft anti-aircraft purposes, that we are using them to hit residential buildings. Of course, this is a result of Ukrainian air defense malfunction, and it's the direct consequence of Ukrainian military installations being placed in peaceful cities, in the center of residential quarters and areas. And normally they are being placed on the outskirts of the cities, but Ukrainians do not adhere to this principle, and this is the direct cause of 99.9% of peaceful population being killed. So that's why for us this is not only a war or military operation, but this is also an interaction with our neighbors, with whom we hope that we will live in peace and harmony for the years to come, when NATO gets out of Ukraine and when the Ukrainians will no longer be brainwashed. So this is our conviction, and that's why, of course, we have this calculation when we do our military planning and our military operation.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. We have 3 questions left. I'm going to try to get through them really quickly. We really appreciate you being here with us. So, Jose, if you could ask a very quick question, and then I go to Berna, and then I would really, really like to hear Jackson's question. So thank you for joining us, Jackson. Go ahead, Jose.
Okay, great. No problem. I'll keep this super quick. I'm not even asking you to comment, Ambassador. I just want to deliver a very quick message, which is this. Here in the United States, we have a policy of lying. We've seen that from people like Condoleezza Rice, Samantha Powers, Tony Blinken. We see that in how they responded to the Nord Stream. We see that how Blinken has responded to the events of the last 72 hours, saying, well, do we even know if this was real? And I just want you to know that there are people in the United States promoting the idea of a new security and development architecture here. There are independent candidates that are trying to stand up and oppose the Ukrainian war policy. And there are people like myself who are standing up. And so I just wanted you to know this, that we believe that in freedom of thought, and that demands that we start from the idea that mankind is good, but that we must face injustice and talk about it in public, that the truth be known to the people, and that may be the only way to prevent thermonuclear war, even at this
Thank
time.
you,
So thank
Jose.
you.
Thank you,
Thank you very
Jose.
much, Jose.
Just a brief reply. Thank you very much, and you should be absolutely aware of the fact that we distinguish between those who rule U.S. And European countries and people who live there. We have a lot of respect towards common Americans, towards common Europeans, and we receive a lot of support from them. But of course, the mainstream media and the establishment and the deep state, as President Trump is calling this, is dominating US politics, and it's very difficult to see any rationale behind the things that the US establishment is doing. But we distinguish very, very clearly.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. So Berna, very quickly to you, and then we'll go to Jackson. Go ahead, Berna.
Yeah, very quick. Earlier on, we discussed Busha, and I'd like this question to highlight how the magic of propaganda works. So, having lived in France, I saw that the French gendarmes were sent to investigate this. Was there actually any diplomatic consultation between Russia and France in terms of this investigation as a useful tool to actually find the truth?
Unfortunately, no, and we can't speak about any investigation because there have been only accusations. And when we presented the facts and we asked some comments on these facts, the Western countries just were saying that this is Russian propaganda. It happens everywhere. It happened in MH17. It happened in Skripal poisoning, in Navalny alleged poisoning. Only one example in Skripal case, for example, we were asking our British colleagues to comment on the fact that there are very big discrepancies and inconsistencies in the official version and the facts on the ground. So even theoretically, if we believe in the U.S. version of things, even theoretically, the Petrov and Bashirov, if they were behind this, they couldn't have made it to the house of Skripal before Skripal's left the house, and this is according to official British investigation. So we asked this question repeatedly. Do you know what the answer was? Now it's classified. It's a top secret. This is internal investigation. You have no access to it, and that's it.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you, Ambassador. We discussed this last night, and one of the things I said was that my country, the UK and the West, does this. What we do is anytime the back is against the wall, they say it's a national security thing and put it straight into the national security bucket, so no one can ask any questions about it. And we see it for what it is. So thank you so much. I would like to ask my question, but I actually think it would be more beneficial to use these last few minutes to let Mr. Jackson Hinkle speak. And I'm hoping you will join us again, Ambassador, so that I can actually converse with you. I've really enjoyed you being here. So Jackson, over to you. Thank you everybody for waiting so patiently. And Jackson, thank you for joining us. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Khaleesi, and thank you, Ambassador. It's good to talk to you again. I'm curious if you've seen, sorry, it's a little loud where I am. I'm curious if you've seen the Chilean-American YouTube blogger Gonzalo Lira has been detained in Kharkov by the SBU again, and it appears as though this time is more serious. They put out an official statement, which I just tweeted out, my most recent tweet. And I just have a request that you and anyone that you can get in contact with who has a powerful voice, like I remember Maria Zakharova spoke about this, and I think it's what actually caused the SBU to release Gonzalo last time, but to just please be concerned about this and call for Gonzalo's release. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackson. The point taken. I haven't seen this story, but I will read your tweets carefully. Thank you, Khaleesi, very much. I think I need to leave, and I wish you all luck. And thank you very much for the interest that you take in Russian position, and for not putting up with the brainwashing machine that you are facing. And I really encourage you to think openly and to look for the facts, and not to fall the victim of propaganda and brainwashing. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. That's precisely why I reached out to you, to give us the perspectives on Russia's side, because we are lacking on the side of the world. So I appreciate your time, and I hope we can engage you soon, some other time that you have plenty of time. Thank you, and have a great day.
The pleasure was mine. Thank you. All the best to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. And I'd like everybody to please follow the Ambassador to get the real news of what's coming out. Really appreciate you being here, and hope to see you again with Shukri very soon. Thank you, Ambassador. Oh, that was amazing. Thank you to all the panelists who waited so patiently. Freddie, excellent questions. Jose, disappointed you didn't even have a question after all that. Harrison, great question. It was fantastic. Thank you. I'm really pleased. And Jackson, thanks for joining.
Khaleesi, I'll drop down now to allow other people to come up to speak, if that's okay.
That's okay, Berna. Thank you so much. How do you think it went, Shukri? Are you happy, Patrick? Let's just get some feedback and then we can carry on.
Sure. Go ahead, Shukri.
I think it went very well. I mean, the ambassador was generous enough with his